Okay, we're talking about entering non-book inventory today. And this webinar assumes that you've seen the videos. There's 3 videos out there that you've seen them in advance. So let's go ahead and go through this. On the videos, we talked about planning. So we went through the whole planning process. And we're going to review that during this webinar. We're going to go through that process. Then we're going to talk about setup. This was not in the videos. So this will be new material. And we'll go through the setup process. We're going to use an example so that you can see how that works in Anthology. So let's review the planning. As you may remember from the videos, department section and media is the structure of your inventory, and we talked about that. And we'll talk about that again in a moment. We talked about the SKU1 field, which is on the inventory record itself, what you want to fill in there, what you want to think about. Barcodes and naming conventions, whether you use barcodes that are on the item or not, if you print barcodes out, if you use naming conventions, what you decide to do with that. The item UPC field, we talked about that. That is on the inventory record again, and we talked about that for the vendor's reorder number. We'll look at that again in a moment. Costing and pricing and Anthology, so you have a better understanding of how that's working. And the level of inventory control, thinking about how much control you want to have over your inventory. Anthology is capable of great control, but too much just then can be cumbersome, so what's the best for your store? And then whether or not to use a purchase order. So let's go ahead and get started with that. We talked about department sections and media. And when you're in Anthology and you're entering your inventory items, you're on the inventory screen, which you see here. This is a little picture of the inventory record. And at this point, in the small scale, you are determining your department section and media for items. But if you never step back and see the big picture, you might not be clear about what the structure of your inventory is. And that's the point of this section, is taking the big look at what's going on instead of just seeing it from the small scale. So we talked about how Anthology, looking at all of your inventory, being up here at the top, but the next division down, or the first division down, would be your departments. So examples of departments would be gifts, books, music. Those are all examples of departments, and it's your first division down. Now, departments are required. You need to figure out what department it goes in, but nothing else is required after that. But if you'd like to divide down your inventory more, the next level down in detail would be jewelry. Would be on your section level. An example of that would be jewelry or puppets. And we talked about a few other examples in the videos. Now, again, not required, but if you wanted to get a little more detail, you could use your media to help you with that. And you could use this example of, say, necklaces or earrings. So you can see this in a very hierarchical fashion, starting from very general down to specific. Now, when you think about whether or not to make it specific or what your needs are, you're thinking about your reporting. There's many issues when you think about your departments, but the critical one here is how do you want your reports to look? What information do you need? And then organizing your inventory accordingly so that you can tell if an item is being supported by your store or if it needs to be moved down or what the turns are. So how you set up the structure is going to help you give you the reporting that you need. We also mentioned that while we're presenting in a very hierarchical fashion, in fact, Anthology's inventory is not hierarchical. It's very flexible. The example that we're using is not meant to be a best practice example, but rather just an idea of what we mean when we say that it's flexible. This is a real-life example. This is a real bookstore did this, and so everyone makes a decision about how they want to use this. So an example of how the inventory can actually be more flexible rather than hierarchical. The idea in this example is using media to represent a topic, in this case, Christmas. So the bookseller wanted to know how well Christmas was doing in their store. They wanted to be able to run a report that showed what the sales were for Christmas items throughout. So they used the media of Christmas to represent that in all their inventory records that were Christmas items. So when they were in the music department, then they had seasonal music there. It had a media of Christmas. And toys, when they had specific toys that were Christmas toys, they had the media of Christmas. greeting cards, etc., candles, and even books. Those books you probably want to stick to whether it's hardcover, paperback. This was their choice to go ahead and mark it as Christmas. By doing this, when they created a report, they could just say, just show me media Christmas, and then see the breakdown throughout their store and see how well it was doing. So again, flexible. So this is an example of the structure of the inventory, and I want to encourage you to go ahead and do this with your inventory. You can go ahead and create something just like this, write it in, figure it out, how you want your inventory to be structured. Okay, we talked about the ISBN SKU field. Remember, it is required. There's an asterisk in front of it. The ISBN SKU field has to be a unique identifier. So what you put in there, you're only going to put on one record and none other. Anthology won't let you duplicate the information in the ISBN SKU field. When we're talking about non-book, we are clearly talking about a SKU because very few items, there are some, but very few have ISBN numbers. So SKU is the common unit throughout, and it varies from item to item. The field here, you can fill it in as you need to. It's alphanumeric. A lot of people don't realize that because they're so used to working with ISBN numbers, they think only numbers can go in there. But it can be any combination, all numbers, all letters, or a combination of the two. Please don't use special characters in there. It was not intended to be used that way. When you're deciding what to put in that SKU field, remembering that it needs to be unique, also remember the cashier needs to bring it up at the cash register. If it's a naming convention, it's what they're going to type in here. Okay, so if you are using a barcode, not so much of a problem, but it might be. So when you think about that as you're entering it in, cashier's got to have a way of selling it at the cash register. So that brings up this next point, which is the barcodes. Now, you're going to find that with non-book items, you probably use the barcode that's on it, and it's the easiest thing to do. So when you're setting up your record, you're just sitting the cursors in the ISBN SKU field, and you just scan the barcode on the item, and that's what goes in the SKU field, and you have your identifier, no problem. Cashier does the same thing when they go to sell it. What do you do when it doesn't have a barcode, or when you've decided that you're going to create more generic records and you're not going to use the barcode that's on it? So what do you do from there? Well, you have a couple of choices. You could print your own barcodes. Pretty easy in Anthology to print out your own barcodes, and you can purchase a barcode printer so you can print out separate labels. Or you could use your Windows printer and print out 30 at a time. Or you could use a naming convention that someone might remember at the cash register and hand type in. So card $1.99 as an example of a naming convention. So you have another one that said card $2.99, card $3.99, etc. And that way when the cashier were to type it in, they have the basic format. They know what to put in there. There are people who also use a barcode catalog. So the idea here is that they've created inventory records, they've selected it, and then they print out a barcode, put it on a piece of paper, or print out a piece of paper. It's kind of heavy so that you can scan it and have it at the cash register so that the cashier can then just scan that when the item comes up. So something like pens, that would be really hard to put a label on it. If you just have a barcode catalog and you have one in there for pens, you just go ahead and scan that, and then that item's in at the cash register. Okay, we talked about the item UPC field. Remember that that's the vendor's reorder number. People get confused about this. They think the UPC code on the item is the vendor's reorder number, and it's not. I don't think I've ever seen it through these years ever be the UPC code. So they usually have their own reorder number, and that would be on the invoice. So when you communicate with the vendor, if you use the UPC code when it's not their number, they're not going to know what you want. So you find out what information is on that invoice, put in their reorder number into the item UPC field, and then in purchase orders, you can tell Anthology to print that out. Now you can communicate with your vendor and tell them what it is you wish to reorder. This is not a required field. You can leave this blank, no problem, but it's there if you'd like to use it. Costing and pricing in Anthology. Consider looking at it, discounts versus non-discounts. discounts. The book industry uses discounts. People are, you're booksellers, so you're familiar with that. The idea is that the price is set already, and the vendor is giving you a discount off of that. So you're going to find that with non-book items that some of them are discounted. Calendars are an example. Things that you might get from a book distributor anyway will often be sold that way. So some things are sold by discount. But a lot of non-book inventory does not use discounts. And so what happens is they're saying, here's the item, we're going to sell it to you for this amount, you figure out what it should sell for. And there's no discounts involved. And that's called net pricing. Okay, so when you're working with a discount in Anthology, on the inventory record, you want to make the list and retail the same. And remember that on the PL, you fill in the discount. There's that assumption you're going to use purchase orders for your process, and it assumes that here as well. So if you follow this with your non-book and you make list and retail the same, you need to use purchase orders and you need to fill in a discount amount. Okay? The other way is net pricing, or not using discounts. And again, this is very common in the non-book industry to have it be net pricing. So on the inventory record, you're going to fill your cost in the list field. Okay, so you know what you paid for it. Put that in your list field. And then you need to determine how much you're going to sell it for, and put that in your retail field. Okay? Remember that if you use a purchase order, and we will always encourage you to use purchase orders if you can, but on there you want to leave the list and retail different. And every once in a while you get questions, like if you do a price change, it's going to ask you if you want to make them the same, and you don't. So remember, leave them different, and do not enter in a discount. If you have the list that represents your real costs, and then you put in a discount, your books are going to show you as making lots of money, which is great, but it's just not accurate, right? So you don't want to do that. You'll skew your numbers by that. Okay, just as a reminder, again, list equals your cost. So what did you pay for the item? That goes in the list field. Retail, that's your price. How much are you selling it to the customer for? And again, this is for non-discounted items. Okay, level of inventory control. How much control do you want to have over your inventory? And right away, when you go to create your inventory record and you go to put in the title description, you're right there making that decision. So let's say that you're working with coffee. If it's just an item that you're selling at your store for convenience, for the benefit of your customers, you may have one or two records called coffee, coffee large, coffee small, and then you'll put it in. That's pretty generic. It's entirely up to you, but that would be in the title description, and that's a pretty general record. Or you may have a cafe where you really desire to know what it is you're selling, and so you're going to create a very detailed record. Example here would be Grand Mocha with raspberry flavorings and candy sprinkles. If this was your title description, you know there's going to be many, many other records. This is large, you're going to have small, you're going to have medium, you're going to have different flavorings, you're going to have with candy sprinkles, without candy sprinkles, so lots of different records. And you can do that in Anthology, no problem. You set up the first time, you use these records over and over again. So you're seeing you can have different levels of control, and there may be good reasons for how you approach that. But as you think about it, think about these other factors behind that. How much maintenance is required? We come up against this most often when booksellers are selling greeting cards. It is probably the most common issue that eventually a bookseller walking through this process will say, this is a lot of work. I don't think I want to do this much work. I'm here to sell books. And the reason why it seems like a large project, having that much control, is because they're selling seasonal cards and they may be supporting many seasons. And for every season, of course, they're entering new records in. They go through the season, they return to vendor, and then chances are those cards never come back in again. A whole new season comes in, new cards, new cycle, and every time you have a season you go through that, and every year it's different, and so you have now a large project. Don't have to do that. So when you're thinking about this, how much maintenance is required? Now, You could have, I mean, the drinks is a good example of things that don't change. You're going to put those drinks in one time, and that's it. Stuffed toys, same way. You put those toys in. That's probably going to be it for the next 2, 3, 5 years. So that level of detail, no problem. You're not creating all kinds of new records and then having those records all be old and doing all this work. Okay, is it purchased as an assortment? An example that I typically run into is the bookmarks. You can buy bookmarks in packages of six different kinds, and people want to put in each individual bookmark, which is no problem. You can do that. And so then it comes back to what goal are you trying to reach when you're creating your inventory records. So if there's a reason that is beneficial to you to put those in, absolutely can, no problem doing that. But if what you're trying to do is to see what you're selling and what you're going to repurchase, it doesn't matter if one of those 6 sells better than the others. If the assortment is selling well, you're going to buy the assortment again, and the individual bookmarks are irrelevant. So you might want to just create one record that represents the assortment and not everything that's in it. An assembly. You can put all the pieces, parts in Anthology. We didn't program it for assembly, so you're not going to find that there. And you might find it's very difficult anyway, figuring out, well, how much grounds in proportion to 1 cup, and how much cream is someone likely to use, and there's all those factors into play here. Well, it's much easier just to to average it out, to think about how much it is per cup. But as an assembly, you're not going to put in the cup, the lids, the grounds, the stirs, and then every time you sell a cup, you decrease those individual inventory items as well. Not going to be very effective in doing that. A lot of energy spent on that. So how much control do you want to have over your inventory? Using purchase orders or not? Of course, we're going to encourage you to use purchase orders. There's a lot of good and important information that comes to you from a purchase order. All your buying history is there. What vendors are you buying from? How much? Did cost of goods sold? Are you making a profit? So it helps you control your inventory, so you know what's coming in, what should be coming in but hasn't come in yet, etc. It's what helps you know where you're at. But there are times when purchase orders are not effective. And a couple examples: generic records. You're very unlikely to be using a purchase order for, and an item that you don't reorder. If you buy it just once, that record's going to represent that one purchase, and you're good to go. You don't need purchase orders for that. And you run into that more with non-book items than you do with book items. Okay, if you're going to use purchase orders, consider, for new people coming in particularly, consider these factors. You're going to create the inventory record first and then send the PO. That's our suggestion to you. Now that might seem at first glance like, well, of course, what else would I do? But when you're talking about new books, we don't tell you to do it that way. We say go into purchase orders, create the record on the fly. That's because you can fetch the information in. And then people turn around and do the same thing with the non-book because they got used to that. You're putting in the book, and then you go to put the non-book in the same way. You're going to find that very cumbersome. It's going to take you a lot of time. So we're going to say go to your inventory, create the inventory records. Don't have to put an on-hand in, especially if you're using a purchase order, and then multi-select and send to the PO and go from there. It's going to be faster that way. Okay. With your beginning inventory, that can be challenging for people. If you're an existing store, you may have items from varying ages. It may be 2 months old to several years old, and doing that research and just that large quantity from your store, it may be quite the project getting non-book inventory in. When you're a new store, if you have quite a bit of non-book inventory in, you have this kind of chaos going on where you're buying, you said, oh, I'm going to buy this, something else comes in, so things are flying in and out, and you're trying to keep up with what's happening, and again, it could be a large project. Ideally, you would create a purchase order that represents that vendor, what you bought from that vendor. Dates are probably not going to happen anyway, but at the correct cost, etc., and then go ahead and receive it. So you've got that history in Anthology. That's the ideal world. So a kind of middle stop to help you would be to go ahead and put your name in as the vendor, and then put everything under your vendor name on the purchase order, and get your prices, your cost, and your prices as close to possible to what really happened. And you know when you look at those records, because it's got your name on it, that those were approximate, and then it was beginning inventory. So that's kind of a middle step if the project is huge. But again, if you can get it in accurately, you're going to have good records. It'll give you information for moving forward. Okay. The other thing we talked about is putting in high on-hand quantities on the record. If you have chosen to turn on the option of warn on last sale, which is a great option, and you don't have to turn it on, but if you did, then the cashier is going to get this message at the cash register when an item is at 0 or less, and they're going to need to answer it. When you're talking about books, this process works out well. You've sold the last one, you send it to a purchase order, now the buyer knows what's going on. It works as a good system. And it can work well with non-book inventory items as well. But when you talk about generic records, it doesn't work out very well. And what will happen is that the cashier is going to learn to say no. It's going to be in their face every time they sell coffee, every time they sell a greeting card, and they're going to be saying no, 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 no. And it slows them down. So what you can do about that is put an on-hand quantity in, 100, 1,000, maybe 10,000. Entirely up to you what number you put in there. And then the cashier does not get this message at the cash register and does not get into the habit of saying no every time they go to ring something up. It does mean, of course, that you have to do a level of maintenance. Somebody needs to go back in and put those quantities in, or you're going to be up against this as soon as it hits 0. As soon as it goes through the numbers you put in. So just keep that in mind. Okay, setup. So this was not part of the video, so we're going into new material. So we're going to talk about gathering documents, what documents you might want to think about pulling together, organizing your non-book items, entering your department sections and media, and deciding what tools to use. Okay? So gathering your documents. What I find is that when people go to enter their non-book inventory in, and most people hearing this are new, they're an existing store new to Anthology, or they're a brand new store new to Anthology. They're not thinking about the process of getting this in, and they've got a lot to do. So remember that if you get your documents in front of you, you decide what you're going to do, you get your documents there. Invoices, packing slips, if you're an existing store, physical inventory items will help you. On the invoices are going to be the vendor's reorder number. It's going to be some of the description. It's going to be your cost. So a lot of important information there. Packing slip has very similar information. And, of course, depending on how you did your physical inventory sheets, it might be there too. When you approach this, again, with that idea that it could be a large project, and it's not for everyone. Some people have just a little bit of non-book items for their store, but for those who have the larger projects, they need to stay organized coming into this. So when you sit down at your computer, you want to have the physical item as well as your document. The physical items needed for the barcode that's on it and to help you with descriptions that are pertaining to that. And then, of course, we talked about the invoice already. So you want to have both of those there, and that takes a level of planning into itself. So you want to map out your store, figure out how you're going to approach that non-book inventory. You're going to do it by location in your store. That can be very helpful because you tend to have similar items in a location. Or by vendor, because you usually buy one type of item from a vendor, so doing it by vendor is helpful. But come at it in an organized way so you know where you're at, you don't get overwhelmed, you don't get confused about what you have in there and what you don't, okay, when you're an existing store. And you need to get those items in. Obviously, we're going to tell you closing your store is your best option. And there's an issue of on-hands. You want to make sure that the on-hands that you have on those records are correct. So the moment you put them in, if you're not using Anthology as your cash register and then you sell them through whatever your current means are, then the on-hands are going to be wrong. So if you close your store, you stay organized, the on-hands stay correct, and you're good to go. A lot of stores are saying, I can't do that. I need to keep my store open. Okay. It's not ideal, but there's some things to think about. You want to enter in your slowest moving items first, and then that's the way you're organizing your entry. So you're thinking about the items that are not moving fast and putting those in first because they're less likely to be sold at the cash register. And since it's sold at the cash register, remember, you need to go back into Anthology and make the adjustments. So do those first. And tag the ones you do so that when they come up to the cash register, you want to train the cashier to look for the tag and then get the information that they need so somebody can go back into Anthology and reverse those on hand. That way you can be open while you're getting your inventory in and still keep your on hand reasonably correct. Okay. We're just reviewing what we talked about before. These are just the things we mentioned. So you're sitting down, you've got your invoice, you've got your items, and now you're reviewing all those concepts we talked about in planning. And you have, you know what your structure is, et cetera, all that information. And so again, structure in mind. Okay, so with that in mind, you're going to go ahead and start getting the information in. It's going to be easier for you if you get your departments in, get your sections in, get your media in for whatever your needs are. You don't have to do it all at one time. It's just easier. And if you do it at the beginning, of course, then it's done. So do what you feel you can there, but try to get as much done as you can before you're entering the records in. Now, entering in the department, section, media, and vendor, very easy. The hard part was the conceptual part, figuring out what it was, how you wanted your structure and what you wanted for your reporting, how you're selling it, all those pieces. That was the hard part. With the decisions made, this is the easy part. When you want to create a department, section, media, or vendor, basically 4 button clicks. So the first button click is F4 New. The second thing, and Anthology immediately goes to the name field, you're going to type the name in. From there, you're going to hit the tab button, and the short code will be filled in for you. And then you will select F10 Save, and the record will be saved. That's it for all of those. F4 New, type in the name, hit tab, F10 Save. So goes in quick and easy, and you'll have those records in place for you. Now, if you start to create your record and you don't have a department, section, or media, and you need to add it, you can, but you might have to get out of the record and then create that department, section, or media, and then come back into the record. So it becomes cumbersome. Okay? Inventory record, it's the same thing we talked about. F4 New, type in the name, hit tab for the short code, F10 Save. Now, people get a little more confused with the vendor record because there's so much more information that they could be filling in. You don't have to fill that information in. And at the beginning, it's just as easy not to, and then go back and fill it in for the ones you're going to order from. That's the ones just for those vendors that you need to fill in that information, who you're going to order from. You might be putting in manufacturers that you never order from. So get the basic records in there, and then you can go back later and fill in that information. But it's entirely up to you. If you prefer to do it now, you can. Okay, so now you've got everything in front of you. You've gone into Anthology. You've created your department, sections, media, and now you're ready to go and enter the items in. You have a couple tools to help you decide which ones you're going to use. One of the tools you're going to use is Quick Inventory Add. It's easy to get to. You want to open up the inventory screen. You can see that in the background here. So you're in inventory. Then you're going to go to the Actions menu and select Quick Inventory Add. When you do, this is the screen that opens up. Now, it's quick because all the fields are here on the screen for you. And just on one screen, compact, easy to get to. You're going to go ahead and enter what you want to enter in. You'll post or save the record, and the screen will stay there. And so you just keep going. Post, enter, post, enter, post, enter, post, and it goes pretty quick. It has some added tools that are very nice. It has some locks on them. So if you're doing all of one department, you can put the department in and lock it in. Same thing is true for any of these items that have locks in front of them. If you're going to work with one particular manufacturer, you can go ahead and lock in the publisher on that particular name. And then when you hit post or save, that blank record will still have that manufacturer listed in there, so you don't have to enter it again. So it's just a couple less fields you have to enter as you go through. Okay, so quick inventory add, very nice tool, lots of people use that. You also have cloning. Cloning is nice because it duplicates the record. Well, there's some fields that aren't duplicated, like ISBN SKU is not. And I can't remember if the item UPC is duplicated. I don't think it is. So everything else, however, is duplicated. So when you have items that are pretty similar, and you're going to have the same department, section, media, vendor, etc., that type of information, and a title description that's pretty close, then cloning is the way to go. So what you would do is you'd go into your inventory record, hit F4 New to create a new record, then go to Actions, like you can see here, and then select Clone this record. And it's going to duplicate that record, except for those specific fields, and then you go in and you tweak what is different, and then save it. Clone, tweak, save, clone, tweak, save. So again, it can go pretty quick by using those. Okay, with those concepts in mind, you're ready to begin entering your inventory in. So what we want to do now, oh, I'm sorry, David, what?
I just wanted to mention, so far so good. Everything, so far everything's been real clear, and I've really appreciated it.
Oh, good. Yay. Okay. The next area, of course, is to go through the example. And usually I have examples to work through, from the audience. So we're just going to make it up instead and go through that. I've done this for enough years that I know I can do the easy ones pretty quick. So let's talk about a typical one now. A lot of people have cafes. So we'll use coffee as our example. I'm going to keep it pretty generic, which we'll just do a small and large coffee. Okay, and so if I was going to do that, again, I would have decided, do I have a cafe department? Do I, or not? Do I put it under miscellaneous? Do I use sections or media? What is it that I want to do? And again, it's all up to me as the bookseller as to what reporting I want to see. So what I'm going to do is make sure that I have a department that is cafe, because I think I would do that, and I do. I have a cafe department. So that's in place. If I didn't, F4 New, type in cafe, hit Tab, F10 save. It's in. Okay? And any other departments I have, I can go ahead and enter them in. The next thing is to look at my sections, because I probably would put in a section of coffee and a section of tea. So I'm going to go to Master Files and go to Sections and see what I have in there. And so if I look at this, I'm seeing that I don't have a coffee and I don't have a tea either. So let's go ahead and create that. So F4 New, I'm going to type in coffee, hit Tab, and then F10 save. Remember, you can do it right off the keyboard. F4 New, type in tea, hit Tab, F10 save. Okay, those are done. I'm not going to use media. I don't have a need for it. Would not necessarily help me, so I'm going to leave that go. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and go into my, and I'm not going to put in a vendor, so we made this really simple. I'm not going to put it in a manufacturer because I'm getting different teas from different places, same thing with coffee, and I'm not going to keep that on a record. So I don't have to put that in. So the next thing I'm going to do is go ahead and go into inventory. So if I go into inventory, I would probably use cloning for this because they're going to be pretty similar. So I'd hit F4 New. Now I need to think about my naming convention here. Or I might print out a barcode. People are printing out barcodes and putting them on the those turn things. I can't think of what they're called. And so they just flip through them, find the right card, pull it out, and scan it. So that works out well too. So I would put in coffee here. I put in something simple so the cashier can remember it. And I probably would put the size in. So let me say small. And then I can leave the item UPC blank. It's not required. List, I'm selling a small one, so I'm just going to say $1.25. I'm going to leave, the retail $1.25. I'm going to leave my list as 0, and my web price as is. I could 0 that too if I wanted to, but I don't really need to. So this part, title description, that's what's going on the receipt, and it's also what's going on the reports. So it's all a matter of what I want to see there. Okay, so I could do it that way, or I could, if I wanted to make it just a little more user-friendly, I might say small coffee. So whatever it is, I would prefer there. Now I can go ahead and select the department and then the section. And I'm typing ahead here. That's how I'm getting these in. I'm clicking in the field and I'm typing in the keyboard very quickly. Some of the letters, brings it right up, hit enter, move on. Okay. The training copy actually does have that option on worn on last sale. So I would probably come in here and I'd go ahead and put in a quantity. Might be a meaningful quantity, might not, but something to keep that message from coming up every time you sell it. Okay, not putting in a manufacturer, so I'm going to go ahead and let that go. I hit F10 save. I'm done with that. Now I'm going to go ahead and put in the medium. So I'd go to Actions, clone this record. You can see things stay here. I want to go ahead and put in my naming convention. So I'm going to go ahead and put in coffee, medium. Yep, and we can go ahead and move on. Obviously, it's going to be a different price here, so I'm just going to say $2. I don't know. I don't know what the prices are. I'm going to go ahead and put in medium, and everything else stays the same. I'm going to go ahead and put in my quantity here, F10 save. You can see how quickly this goes. Okay, so let's use the example of tea. I might do a large coffee, etc. Let's use the example of tea. And I can go ahead and clone this if I want to. I can hit F4 new, whichever way works best for me, because I'm going to end up tweaking most of this anyway. So I'm going to say tea small, and I'm going to, let's do $1.25 again, keep it consistent. I'm going to make that 0. And I'm going to switch this to T. And okay, put in my on-hand quantity, F10 save. Let's go ahead and do one more. Actions. And change the price. And I can change that. Okay, my on hand. Okay, I just got a number of records in very quickly. So let's go ahead and see this in practice now. Let's say I entered these records. Let's go ahead and take a look at that. I'll go to the List tab, and you can see the records that I've entered in. So here are my tea. The coffee is up above. So they're in Anthology. So let's go ahead and show that at the cash register now. If I go to my cash register, and so a customer's coming up with their coffee, I'm going to go ahead and type that in, and let's say it's small. I hit enter off my keyboard. It finds it, brings it straight in. I'm ready to do the next thing. Let's say that they brought a tea, it's also small. Okay, so it's in. It's just that quick. So then you go ahead and take your tenders as you normally would. That's my paperless printer. Click any key to continue. So now I've cleared my screen. I just want to do a few more. So let me do, because I want to show you the reporting. Now I've got scan mode on, which assumes a quantity of 1, but I'm going to up this a bit so I can see that. And then I'm going to hit F3, take tenders, take my tender, complete the transaction. And now let's go ahead, well, I need to go ahead and clear my sales here, so I'm going to go ahead and Z out real quick here. Okay, and now I'm going to go ahead and look at my sales history report. Of course, I want to choose today because that's when it happened. And I can choose how I want to sort this, right? I know it's going to be the cafe department, so I might want to, well, I'm going to get rid of this. And we might want to do it by section so I can see the breakout from there. And then I can go ahead and print it. Let's take a look at it. And now I can see, here's my medium coffee, here's my small coffee, there's my tea. I can see how much I sold, and so I've got that information there. Now I'm not getting cost of goods sold. I put the list in as 0. If you think you have a pretty good handle on how much it's costing you, go ahead and put that in the list field. But don't feel like you need to do that. Okay? Any questions about that? Anything, David?
Absolutely not. This has just been absolutely a great. I've really enjoyed it so far. It's been a great refresher.
Good. I'm going to use the example of tea here for sending it to PO. You wouldn't typically do this with tea. It's a generic record, but the process is the same regardless of what inventory items you choose. So what I probably will do, make it at least a little more realistic. F10 save. So I've got that in there. So if I was ordering this from Lipton, I could go ahead and multi-select my records and then hit F12, send to PO. If I had a PO there already, I could go ahead and choose that PO. If I didn't, I could hit F4 new. Now I can go ahead and put Lipton in. And I can go ahead and adjust as to how how many am I ordering? Oh, well, I don't know if I have it by the bag or the box. I mean, I could do it that way. I could enter this in by the bag or the box. But let's just put a quantity in there of 12. And I had the list price as 0. You probably would have a price for boxes if you were buying it. So let's just say that it was $4, just to put a number in there. I'm not going to put a discount in because my list and retail are different. I'm going to click on the enter line. And see, now it's asking the question. I'm going to say no here. Okay. I can do the same thing with the medium tea. I can go ahead and make that 12. I did put a list price in that one. I'll leave that. No discount, enter line, so forth. So now I've got that in. I can go ahead and save it, post it, go to receiving, receive all, and that way you've got your purchase orders for those beginning items, those beginning inventory items that you've put in. So that's the process you do. Go to inventory, send the PO, fill the PO in for how many it is that you did receive, and then go through the receiving process. Post that PO, the draft PO to open, receive, post. And so it's in. You've got that document in. Any questions about that part?
No questions at all.
Okay. Well, that's everything I have. So don't forget the videos that goes back to the planning part of it. You can always go ahead and see those. There's 3 of them that are out there. So if there's nothing more, I'm going to go ahead and complete.